Alright, so this is Unit 2. At the bottom it says Unit 2, Lesson 2. We're going to look, first of all, when we're looking at the domain, we're looking at the x-axis. And also I want you to remember that for the domain, we start on the left and then move right, meaning going from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay, so if you keep going to the left, this would lead you to negative infinity. If you keep going to the right, this would take you to positive infinity. So we go from negative to positive. So the domain, we look on the x-axis, so we look on the leftmost of the graph, and we look down. We see it starting at -10 and stopping at -2. So that is the domain. So the way we would write it as in interval notation, so you notice here there's a closed circle. So a closed circle, we would put a closed bracket, so it looks like a little half a rectangle like that. And we write the first number, which is -10, comma, and then we go to the number, this one, -2, and there's also a closed bracket, which means it includes -2, and we put a closed bracket like that. That is writing it in interval notation. If you want to write it in set notation or using inequalities, we write like this. We write, because it's the domain, we write the letter, well, the variable x, and we use inequalities. It's always going to be less than on either side, and then you put the number. So you have -10, and you would have -2 here. The only difference is, now if it's a closed bracket, which means it includes it, so we say less than or equal to, less than or equal to. So again, let me just write it up here. If it's a closed bracket, or closed circle, we use a closed bracket, and then we use less than or equal to for that. If it's an open circle, which we'll see in the next problem, you use a parentheses, and then you use just less than. You don't have to put the line underneath because it does not include it. So these ones are included. These is not included, meaning that number we're starting from doesn't include it. So that is the domain. And then the range for the problem, you look on the y-axis. So you would look at, for the y-axis, for the range, we always start from the bottom. And then you go up. Because at the bottom is where your negative infinity is, and then the top is where your positive. So it's going from, always go from negative to positive. So on the range, on the y-axis, you see it's the lowest point is at 3, and the highest point is at 18. So from 3 to 18. So to write that, and they both are closed circles, we write 3, 18. And to write it in using inequalities, you will write the letter y, because we're talking about the range here. Then you always less than, and then this is less than or equal to, and then you have your numbers 3 and then 18. So basically it's saying y is between 3 and 18, and then for the domain, the x is between -10 and -2. So these are the two ways that we use, that we look at domain and range. Okay, so the next problem, let's look at the domain. So always start from the left. So it's starting at -6, comma, and then it's going at +2. Now at -6, it's a closed circle, so we put a closed bracket. At 2, you see there's an open circle, which means we put an open bracket. Alright, so to write it, same information using inequalities. So we write x because we're looking at the domain. And then we put the numbers, -6 and 2. And then let's see if this is equal to. So -6, it is equal to it. I mean, there's a closed circle, so we put an equal to sign. It includes the -6. Over here, 2 is open because it's an open circle, so we just leave it like that, which means that it goes all the way up to 2, but it doesn't include the 2. Range, so we start at the bottom and go to the y-axis for the range. So it starts at -5 and then stops at 25. It's going from -5 to 25. Alright, so at -5 there's an open circle, so which means that I put an open bracket, doesn't include it, and then at 25 there's a closed circle, so we put a closed bracket. To write the same information in inequalities, write the numbers, -5, 25, and then again at -5 is an open circle, so we leave it not equal to, and at 25 there's a closed circle, so we do have to include that. Okay, let's try a few more examples here. So number 3. For the domain, so we're going to start on the x-axis first. So on the x-axis it's actually starting at 0 right there until 4. So 0 and 4. At 0 there's an open circle, so I'm going to put an open bracket. And then at 4 there's a closed circle, so I'm going to put a closed bracket. And then let me write, so domain, we know that's the x. These are my numbers. And then let's see, again at 0 it's an open bracket, so we don't have to include it. And then this is a closed bracket, so we do have to put the equal to sign, so it includes it. Okay, for the range, always start at the bottom. So it's at -4 up until the highest point is at 1. And then at -4 it's a closed circle, so I'm going to put a closed bracket. And at 1 it's I believe it's an open circle. Let's see. Yeah, let's just write over it. It's an open circle, so I'm going to put a bracket. A parentheses. So because it's the range, we're looking at the y. And so you put -4 and 1, and at -4 it's a closed, so we include it. Here it's an open, so I don't include it. Okay, number 4. For the domain, so it is starting on the x-axis at 6, and it's stopping right here at 7. So it's between, and why I said 6, I meant 1 and 7. So it's from 1, 7. At 1 is a closed circle. At 7, it's also a closed circle. It includes all of this, so it's definitely closed. And then when I'm writing it using inequalities, x because it's domain, and then 1 and 7, 1 starting at 1, stopping at 7, and they both are included. And then for the range, the bottom, it's starting at 1, and it's stopping at 6. And then they both are closed, they both are included. And then because we're talking about the range, I'm going to put y less than, or equal to 1. It's going starting at 1 and stopping at 6. That's the range. I'm going to have you try 5 and 6, and you can check the answer key later. Alright, now let's go to this new set here where we have arrows. Arrows represent infinity, okay, so which means that it keeps going and going and going. So we have to be very careful here. Okay, so let's look at the domain. So the domain, the same idea, we're going to start on the leftmost, it's at -2. And then the rightmost, since there's an arrow, it keeps on going to the right, which means that it keeps going to positive infinity. And then at -2, there's a closed circle, so I'm going to put a bracket. And by default, infinities are always open. Okay, you never put a bracket for infinity. Using inequalities, so since I'm talking about the domain, I put an x less than -2 infinity, and this is closed and this is open. Now, there is a thing here where if you only see one arrow, which means that x is between -2 and infinity, there's another way we write it, actually a better way that we write it. We say x is greater or equal to -2. So everything greater or equal to -2. This would be the right way to write it. Okay. Range. So the range is on the y-axis at the bottom. It starts at -4. And then it doesn't stop here. It keeps going and actually keeps going up. So it keeps going to infinity. Is it -4? It's touching it at -4, so I'm going to include it. And then this is by default greater than, what am I saying, greater? Open circle. And then the range, again, you can write it like this, where you have y is between -4 and infinity. But again, whenever you have something like this, when you have just one infinity, we like to write it like this. So you have y greater or equal to -4. That's a better way to write it. So everything greater than -4. Greater means it's going towards infinity. So same thing here, I only see one arrow, so I know it's going to end up looking like something like this. But first, let's do the interval notation. So interval, actually the word interval means sections of the graph. So we're taking in sections of the graph and describing it using math symbols. So for domain, the leftmost point is at -2. The rightmost point is not at 16, it actually keeps going to the right, so it's infinity. So it's from -2 to positive infinity. Infinity is always open. -2, it is closed. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bracket. And then in other words, we can say that the domain x is greater than or equal to -2. Instead of writing all of that, we just say x is greater or equal to -2. Range. The lowest point here is, at 1, right there. And it's not really stopping at 4, right? Because of the arrow, it keeps on going. So it's actually at infinity. I'm going to include the 1. And infinity is always open. So we can say that the range is everything greater or equal to 1. Okay. Okay, so here I am going to go through all of these ones because all the situations are a little different. So hopefully you'll see the difference in how do we write these. Okay, so the domain. We're looking at the x-axis, so let's start from the left. We always have to start from the left. On the left side, it's not really starting at -32. It's actually starting at, if it's starting from the left, it keeps going to the left, and guess where it is starting from? It's starting from -infinity, okay? So from -infinity until right here on the x-axis, it's at +4. So from -infinity until +4. And so infinity is always open, and then the 4 is also open because there's an open circle, so I'm going to put a parentheses. Now for this one, instead of writing it like this, -infinity to 4, instead of writing it like that, we say, well, the domain is everything x is less than 4. Okay, so we're saying that you go to 4 and then go to the left because your graph is on the left of 4. Okay, and I'm not going to put equal to because it's open. It's not a closed circle. All right, for the range. So we always start at the bottom. It's at -6. 16, negative 16, and then it's not really stopping at 2, right? It actually keeps going up. So it's going to positive infinity. I'm going to put an open and open here as well, because 16 also, it's also an open circle. Okay, so for here, you can see that your range, y, is everything greater than 16, because it's going up. Everything is higher than 16. Okay, number 4. So for here, the domain is actually going, there's an infinity here because it's going to the left, negative infinity to positive infinity because it keeps going to the right. So you can write it like this. And this just means if it's going all the way, it's covering everything. This is all real numbers. So the whole number line actually is part of the domain. So when we're writing it as an inequality, I guess you can write it like this. Or again, you can just say all real numbers. Okay. Okay, and then for the range, same thing here at the bottom. Even though it's going to the right, it also keeps going down. And then it keeps going up as well. Even though it looks like it's going to the left, it's actually also going up. So this is also from negative infinity to positive infinity. And it's between negative infinity to positive infinity. And so we can just say this is also all real numbers. All real numbers. Okay. So yeah, whenever you have two arrows like this, it's going to end up being all real numbers. Most of the time, actually. Not all the time, but most of the time. All right, so let's look at this one. Domain. So we see that it is starting, it's not really starting at negative 5. It's actually starting from negative infinity until 3. Infinity is always open, and 3 is also open because it's an open circle. So we can say that since there's only one number, we can say that x is everything less than 3. So for the domain, everything is going to the left side of 3. And then for range, so at the bottom, it's not, since there's an arrow, it keeps going down. So it's from negative infinity here, it keeps coming from negative infinity all the way up till positive 16. So it's an open circle because it's infinity, and then this is also an open circle, so I'm going to put a parentheses. And then we can say that the range y is everything less than 16 because you can see it starts at 16 and everything is going below it. So there's no need to write two inequalities. All right. For the domain, we have here is starting at negative 4. And then it's not really stopping at 3. It keeps going, even though it looks like it's going down, it's actually going right and down, right, like that. So it's going to positive infinity. Don't write negative because we're really looking at the domain. It keeps moving to right to positive infinity. And then at negative 4, it's closed. And then at infinity, it's open. So we can say x, the domain, is everything less than or equal to 4. Because if you look, oh, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. I knew I did it wrong. I was looking at the range. And I wrote with a pen. Greater or equal to. Okay. All right, the range. So we have here at the bottom, it's not really starting at negative 5. It's actually starting from the bottom. So it's starting from negative infinity all the way up to 2. And then, so for 2, I'm going to put a closed bracket. So we can say that the range y is everything less than 2. Less than or equal to 2, I should say.